Welcome. You're listening to Under the Surface, a podcast where we have in-depth discussions on computer-aided techniques in drug discovery. I'm Chris Williams, my host Dave Thompson.
Hello.
A super senior
scientist, thank you very much.
At CCG, and our guest today is a senior scientist at CCG, Sarah, and she's going to tell us about what it's like to be a support scientist in one of the remote offices of CCG.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Yeah, welcome, Sarah. I think our listeners would like to know what goes on in the mind of support scientists at CCG.
Ooh, it's dark in there.
Well, that's it's dark. And that's why we've had you on. I'm too old and jaded to give any sort of clear view of what this job is. So I think you, as a two-time CCG employee, second tour of duty, you can give us sort of the lowdown on what the support job is. Good points, bad points, and what kind of draws you to the job, keeps you here, and what it means to actually support the customers.
Makes sense. Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to use one of these very often used phrases. Now, I'm not a native English speaker, so I'm just hopefully don't mangle it too much. But this
doesn't matter. It's English.
It's in English anyway. You're a jack of all trades and a master of none, basically. Is how I feel about it. Now, whenever I have someone coming up and asking me about my job, I say, well, it's like a broad spectrum, really, right? Where we do many different sorts of things. And while technically each of us will need to be able to do all of them, we also gravitate towards different areas, right? So if we start on one end of the spectrum, you will do very technical things, like you'll write custom code, you'll write a script for a workflow that will help a customer do this task many times, or you might help them connect to a cluster or set a calculation up with these sorts of things. Going a bit more, a bit away from the very technical aspect, you also have the very scientific aspect where we answer questions, right? And sure, some of the questions are, where is this button? How do I do this thing? But a lot of it is also a scientific discussion with your client or your customer about a topic, right? So they will tell you, I've been thinking about doing this thing. What do you think? And then you can, tell them, look, I'm not sure, maybe try this approach, or maybe they read a paper and they said, okay, I'd like to try this out. And you can say, sure, let's try that out together.
So it's the collaborative aspect.
Yeah,
in a sense.
exactly.
You're almost like working on a research project.
Yeah, you are, right? And we often do that, right? We can set up CDAs, so confidentiality agreements, so we can be even more collaborative about certain projects. And then at the very other end of the scale, you have the very social aspect, where we spend a lot of time socially with our customers, right? So for instance, we have our user group meeting and we'll meet a lot of our customers in person, spend time with them both for the conference, but also for dinner, right? And that part I think is really important because we do sell software. A lot of that is really building a relationship with them. If you're going out to buying an expensive car, or in my case, I don't have a car and I don't have money for a car, but expensive glasses,
That's
right?
That's not a reflection on CCG.
That's not a reflection on CCG. No.
Disclaimer. Just right there. Okay, I don't have money for a car. I can never afford a car.
Just to let you know, we actually pay zero.
Many people in this company have a car. Even if I had the money,
she fritters her money away on other things.
Frivolously, on yarn, for instance.
She's wearing a gold lame jumpsuit for this recording, just to be clear on that.
So once I pay for that, obviously, all I can do is pay for my glasses. Exactly. But my point about that is, when I go and pay quite a lot of money for having my eyesight corrected, because that's how cool my life is, I want to give that money to someone I have a good relationship with, right? I want to trust them. I want to trust that they take good care of making this item for me that I pay a fair amount of money for. And that's the same thing with a piece of software, right? Like, a lot of what we do is down on trust, and it's down on us having a good relationship with our customers. So I think that whole spectrum, and obviously depending on who you are, you might fall more into one end of that or not. So it's a really broad job description.
Which is good. It keeps you on your toes, right?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
One of our employees, so there's like 10 jobs. You're a programmer one day, you're a help desk the other day, you're setting up a booth in the APS the next day, you're kind of like a blue collar worker. Then you got to go find a garbage can because you're at a exhibit hall or something. So there's lots of interesting aspects to the travel, interacting with customers, understanding the scientific problems.
That's what I like most about it. Is that
the constant change?
Every given day is different.
Yeah.
Right? One day, like you said, it could be where's the button, and the other day it can be write me a script that does this thing and does it a million times quickly, and another day it could be I read this paper and how do I have to tell someone that that's a sucky idea, don't do it. I mean,
and another day it could be, why is this thing not working?
And then it's exactly, did you try turning it off and turn it on again?
Oops, I got the wrong version of the code, not again.
Yeah, exactly. What did you do before being a support scientist? Like, what's your academic training?
Oh dear, long. I went to university, did my bachelor, did my master's. Then I worked at university for a year doing molecular dynamic simulations of RNA.
Did you always do computational stuff? So for your undergraduate and your postgraduate?
We can be more precise. I studied chemistry and I did my bachelor in the laboratory, and I realized that I really did not like it. Like, I really did not like it.
Just the constant fear of death?
I mean, there was all this what is it called in English? HG, mercury.
Mercury.
Did not enjoy the mercury reactions, did not enjoy the sodium reactions, did not enjoy spending a whole day trying to find an NMR solvent to, do a test on my sample, which is funny because then later on, I didn't mind spending a whole day on reformatting a PDB file, right? It's just...
Well, it's just that they smell better, right?
For sure.
The problem with chemistry is it's like cooking, but you can't taste it.
Oh, and there's so much cleaning afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Goodness me.
I remember, so one of the first job I had, I worked in explosives. And before that, I worked in a Greek restaurant making salad dressing and use these industrial Hobart mixers. So I finally get a job in a lab. I go there and we're making emulsion explosives. They're using the same Hobart mixer, except this one's steam jacketed and grounded so that it doesn't explode. So I thought I was getting away from the kitchen, but I wasn't.
No.
So hence my choice of computational chemistry. Well, much safer for everybody.
Indeed.
It seems like we all picked that because of us not wanting to explode or just.
You were in the lab too, Dave.
I was. I mean, everyone has to do some lab, right? I remember poking a hole through a test tube that was filled with liquid ammonia and exploded in the fume hood. And of course, I was like, oh well, I guess the lab's done. And no, I had to repeat the lab, and they made me characterize the stuff I'd made. So it was
by tasting.
No, by tasting. Yep, tastes like glass. Yep, no, that's blood. Ow. But yeah, all right. So then you go into computational.
Best
stuff.
for the whole world that we're not doing laboratory-based work
100%.
anymore. Yeah, no. So I went to the dark side. I went to computational chemistry.
All right, you cashed in.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
So I went to do membranes. I'd done molecular dynamics of membranes for years. Once I was done with my master, I had a year of working for the nucleotide center that we had at the university. It had a long title, I forgot it again, doing simulations on RNA and DNA. And then...
to what end?
We were looking at antibiotic resistance, trying to understand how modifications in the protein would bind the RNA or DNA better. And we were also looking at doing modified nucleic acids. So this center, I was at the nucleic acid center that has a long title that I forgot again, made these double-headed nucleotides. So you had one sugar ring and then two bases on, and seeing how they incorporate, whether that would increase the stability of the fold of the RNA.
Cool.
So that was the sort of thing we did.
And was this all in Denmark?
This was all in Denmark, yeah.
Okay.
In Odense.
Okay.
At the University of Southern Denmark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Then I did some teaching as well. You got to make money, right? So I did teaching of basically all the first, second year chemistry courses, some of the third year chemistry courses too. Then there was funding for my PhD, and I started my PhD doing molecular dynamics on membranes.
Nice.
So we were back again. This time it was bacterial membranes. We stayed within the, antibiotics. So there was a Nature paper describing this peptide called plectacin, and how it would come in and sequester one of the lipids that was building up the bacterial wall, right? So you have the building blocks being made inside the cell. This name of the lipid is lipid 2. There is a lipid 1. There's no lipid 3 as far as I recall. Might be wrong, but lipid 2 goes inside the cell, gets a building block, grabs it, goes out, deposits the building block, and builds it on the bacterial wall. And this system is heavily interacted with antibiotics, right? Mm-hmm. But it's also one of the systems where you can easily get resistance. So there was these researchers, again, I forgot their name, that found that this plecticin, which is in a mushroom of sorts, had antimicrobial or antibacterial activities. And they thought it was by interacting with lipid 2, and they thought that it would do a novel interaction, and therefore, because of the kind of interactions, it was less likely to have resistance. So I spent my whole PhD simulating this and just failing miserably, right? So they were really kind. They gave me the docked starting structure. So plecticin had been docked to lipid 2 by a professor in the Netherlands. I'm not going to mention the name because it utterly failed for me, but it was very kind of them. They gave it to me, and I, I simulated it. And it fell apart. And I simulated it and I fell apart. And I changed the lipid composition of the membrane. I changed the membrane into a vesicle. So
you're doing the whole system here. You got the membrane, you got the protein, you got waters. And when you run it long enough, it just decays. You
didn't even have to run it very long. Like a few nanoseconds, and this little plecticin would be like, goodbye, lipid 2. I'm going over here, having much more fun with the membrane rather than plecticin.
Yeah.
So how did you approach telling the experimentalists that they were wrong?
Well, we did not, basically, right? We did the passive aggressive thing of we published a paper saying this is our findings. We had a look at the experimental data, so they had NMR data, and looking at the NMR data, we were like, actually, I'm not sure that your conclusions of how the interaction is, and then the restraints you put into this tool called Haddock, that is a docking tool with restraints. I'm not sure that the NMR data would actually verify or make it reasonable that you've done that calculation. But at that stage, my PhD was done, right?
Overall, a good experience?
A mixed bag, which I think is quite,
par for the course.
Yeah.
In a PhD, right? I mean, you're supposed to suffer a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think you are. Like, I have
so it just sets you up for failure in real life.
Exactly.
I mean, if research worked, like the answers aren't at the back of the book. It's
funny. A few people come out and it works, and then they think the rest of their life is going to be like.
Well, that's the. If you get lucky early,
that's episode 4.
Find one of those few rare unicorns.
So, what made you want to work in application science? I mean, usually some people love it, some people hate it.
Did application science come right afterwards, or?
Here's the funny thing. So I was spending a lot of my PhD away from my home university in Denmark. So I spent a lot of it in San Diego, and I spent a lot of it in Southampton in the UK. And
Two incredibly different places.
Yeah, those should not be equated. No.
But they're different from Denmark.
Also that, yes. Yeah, no, that's quite different. I was very lucky though, and I got to meet some really cool people, and I think I was saved a bit by that and by the groups that I worked with. But I didn't know what to do afterwards. And there was this guy, my good friend, Sam, and he was like, you know what? I know someone. She works for this company. They make software and they're looking for someone. I will put you two in contact. And that was Barbara, our colleague.
I thought you knew Barbara from.
I didn't know.
No, you didn't. I thought you did university.
She was in Southampton, but we did not overlap in time. So the missing link here is Sam.
Sam's the missing link. You're saying.
Sam is the missing link.
So is he going to be? Here's to Sam. Is he happy with that description of himself?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. He might come on.
Wait, I'm sorry. So how does Sam had that connection to Barbara through your time in Southampton?
Well, he was there for longer, right? So he was there overlapping with Barbara. Then Barbara was done with her PhD and left, right? And then I came in later.
Yeah.
And well, basically that's how.
The rest is history.
Yeah. So Barbara said, well, why don't you come and visit me in Cologne? So I did, which was great. And she took me around and, we had a good time. And then I applied for a job. Never heard about an application scientist before. I feel a bit bad saying that now because my whole career is application science.
It's when you go do a PhD, you don't think of going into the service industry.
Whoa.
I didn't even
Well,
think
that's
it was
what it
there.
is in some ways,
I didn't even
right?
know it
That's
existed.
No, I get where you're coming from, because unless you go to conferences, I didn't go to too many conferences in my PhD, but I went to one conference, the Canadian Chemical Society, which is like ACS, but much, much, much smaller. And they had one room with the booths. And at that point, there was a company, Hyperchem, selling their software.
Love Hyperchem. They sell Spartan, right?
Yeah. So two guys in suits,
Wow.
peddling their wares at the booth. And I thought to myself, as a young grad student, like, I'd never want to be those guys.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
But honestly, Dave, had you heard of an application scientist when you were doing your PhD?
No, I don't think I had. No, not when I was doing my PhD, for sure. No, but I do remember.
Yeah, when he worked for a real company, he knew about us because we're the support team, right?
Well, I always felt bad. I try and fix it. I shouldn't say this. I do try and fix stuff myself. And I remember my experiences with CCG support were through R&D at the time.
Oh, okay.
Because I was one of the first guinea pigs of my web server.
Oh, that's right.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
So I was putting that through its paces. But no, I hadn't. But I do remember distinctly my first couple of trips to the ACS. You're walking through the booths and you're like,
oh, it's
look at these suckers at the booths.
Yeah, I mean, as being Canadian,
Grab the free pens.
Yeah.
Canadian, Danish, and English, you're not used to that size.
Yeah.
No, I've never been to an ACS.
You've not been to an ACS?
No, I have not.
The last one was about half the size I remember. It was pretty small. It was Indianapolis. It was okay. It's coming back after COVID. But the first time you see this as a application scientist just out of grad school.
Like 20,000 people.
20,000 people, 600 booths. I mean, it takes you 10, 15 minutes to walk the length of the
my little brain
corridors.
cannot capture that. No.
Yeah.
It's you got to see it to believe it, in a sense.
So none of us had heard of application scientists then.
No.
And then Barbara, you spent this time with Barbara.
Yeah.
And then was Barbara trying to convince you that there was a role and you'd be a good fit?
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Testing out the waters, I think, on both sides, right? Like from me and from them.
So when you do this in North America, there's a conversation you'll have with Chris. He'll tell you the deal about application science.
I remember.
You remember the shock treatment slide?
Yes.
It's like what you're used to in a PhD. It's not going to be a little bit different.
Well, I think actually that whole service industry thing is really important because it's about like your job is not to get in front of people and to try and be the smartest person you can. It's to try and help them as fast as possible.
Yeah. That
requires a de-egoification, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably the big part of the de-egoification because we had one person who worked for us, a great support scientist, but he, fancied himself a programmer and wanted to do research, and he's a smart guy. But you could tell he was embarrassed because he was calling his girlfriend back in New Jersey saying, "Oh, I'm at the help desk now, but soon I'll be working in the R&D team." So at one level, you're at the help desk.
Yeah.
Where do I work? I work at the help desk, but
nice.
It's sort of like being a concierge in the hotel. Like everyone is yelling at you, and you're sort of keeping your cool, and you get to interact with a lot of people. And I think in some ways you learn a lot more than you think. The person at the help desk in a lot of places solves a lot of problems. They see a lot of technology. You're getting your hands dirty constantly with real life problems. So it's sort of, I think it's a very big contrast from the PhD where you learn more and more about less and less until you know absolutely everything about nothing.
Yeah.
I got to attribute that to one of my math professors from a long time ago. But I learned so much because I did quantum in my PhD. So I do calculations on reaction mechanisms and things. I didn't know anything about protein alignments, fingerprints, database searching, cheminformatics. And then when you go in drug discovery is I think exciting that way because you throw everything at it, everything with the kitchen sink, right? Like it's not, I'm in this field. What's going to make the next drug? Do you think that will go learn about that? Try it. Typically it won't help too much, like most things, but we keep trying new technologies. And I think that's probably one of the exciting aspects of the job.
Absolutely super exciting. And as I just said before, super scary, right? Because
super scary is the first installment. When your first tour of duty is CCG, go on.
Well, my first tour of the CCG, it was a scary experience on many accounts, right? Because you have to mature on many levels. We spoke a bit about this before we started recording, right? This whole thing about you're both growing up, right? You're at a stage where you're growing up. You're leaving academia and you're changing your mindset to a different mindset. And you're also leaving your field of research that you spent donkey's years perfecting your knowledge on this tiny, tiny topic. And suddenly you need to know this amount, right? Like a big amount. So it is overwhelming on many accounts. For sure it is.
Did you feel prepared for that when you, did you understand how overwhelming you would feel it would be?
No.
So we were like, it's like a glamorous job. There'll be travel, there'll be expense accounts.
It's funny. You always think that travel is going to be exciting and glamorous. And
it is.
Sure. Yeah, it is.
I took the train yesterday. And
if you like industrial sites in Frankfurt, it's super glamorous, if that's your thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Didcot Power Station, which apparently is the most average city in the UK. I'm looking at you, Dave.
I'm the only average English person at this table, apparently.
Yeah, this place is the most average.
Yep.
We've determined that.
We've looked at all the places.
Everyone's resigned to it. Yeah, we're average here.
Yep, it's all good. I absolutely dig. Right, so I've literally just met you like an hour ago, and I absolutely dig the fact that you framed the thing we do together that way, because that's how I would describe it, right? You pay a good chunk of money. Like, can you imagine a thing that's been under active development for 30 years?
Yep.
You get a licensing check for them, and it's not enough just to give them 2 thumbs up.
Here you go. Have fun.
Exactly. Like the idea that you would know all the bells and whistles, that you would know all of the capabilities of this tool is redonkulous. And so the fact that you have a team of people that we're a part of that are there to provide that guidance, I think is such a crucial part of what we do. So I love that you framed it that way, because I think it's so important.
Yeah, and it's self-serving. It's like they've got this amazing tool in their hands. No one's going to be able to.
Yeah.
Some people can learn all on their own pretty quickly, but it's nice to have a helping hand or show you how to use the power tool. And that's kind of what we try to do, is show you how to use this thing to get to whatever result you want. Here's the challenge. The first person wants to do some docking study. Someone else wants to do some protein alignments. Someone else wants to fire up a cluster. Someone wants to program some paper.
Yeah.
It's always changing. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think like a really cool aspect of that job we have is that, we are in support, right? But we actually are trusted with a lot of knowledge from our customers, right? We see so many different customers. You keep mentioning, Chris, like the broadness in the tool that we have, right? We have tools for more bioinformatics. We have tools for cheminformatics. We have tools for QM or for MD, or like a huge range, biologics and so on. And I actually find us incredibly lucky that we get to talk to all these different customers, and everyone is interested in explaining to us what they're doing. And you would not be able to find that same broadness of knowledge, I think, in any other job, right? While you may not do the thing yourself, you're still part of it. You still know what's happening.
I think you get the backstage scoop. If you go to a conference and you're talking to a colleague who's also doing this kind of research, and as a bit of a competitor, perhaps, you're not going to get the same honesty about what's the nuts and bolts, right? I think we get a lot of the nuts and bolts. People want to do this, type of study, but all the problems and the complications and quirks with it, that's where they talk to us. So we can really understand that the intricacies of their problem. Whereas if we were colleagues working in a different company, or say from a different university, they'd give us sort of a vague description of what they were doing, and maybe not be as forthcoming with the information. For us, they're honest with us because we're the technicians that's going to help them use the tool.
Yeah,
right.
But it's also an incredible grounding experience, and I think it's a real. You get a lot of humility around your job and your education, right? Because there's just so much, and you'll never be able to know all of it.
Well,
and I think,
that's the thing. When you realize like there's no way I'm going to know it all,
no.
When you come into your PhD, you're solid. I've read all the papers. I'm a complete expert on this one thing, and I'm confident. Whereas now you've got to sort of, for lack of a better word, fake it. You've got to learn enough to make this thing kind of work. You're not an expert. You have to admit you're not an expert, but kind of know enough to help you get along to where you need to go. And that's, I think, part of the, being able to be humble, right?
Yeah.
And maybe
exercise
I'm wrong.
in humility.
I'm going to try and help you. And then someone will say, that's not the way it works. I'm an expert. sorry, I got it wrong. I tried my best. I wasn't lying, but
And now I learned, right?
Now I learned. Yeah.
I used to be very, very anxious about site visits and stuff. Right? You'd rock up to a customer's, you travel to a customer's, you get to a site visit. You're not sure who's going to be in the room. You're not sure what they're going to ask you. I got to preserve my fragile male ego, and I can't admit to being wrong. I can't admit to not knowing. And then I realized that the secret is just, if you know the answer, say the answer. If you think you know the answer, say you think you know the answer. And if you're not sure, the best thing you can do is not make it up. You make a faithful note of the problem.
Yeah.
You say it back to them so that they can validate that you've understood the problem, and you commit to giving them an answer as soon as you get back to the office.
And that's a bit opposite from, say, your PhD defense, right? We're taught a lot in academia until you got to know everything.
Yeah.
And if you don't know something, why are you up there talking to me?
I'm waiting for a site visit where someone quizzes me on my PhD, but that still hasn't happened. So I guess I'll just have to.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because we have a lot of good documentation. If anyone should feel so inclined, we have a really good documentation, right? And when I started, I thought, I better read all of this. I better read and understand all of this, which is impossible, basically, right? Like maybe in a couple of decades, I've gone through the most of it, but having to acknowledge that. And I see that when new colleagues come in and they're like, oh yeah, I read the documentation and this, and I feel like, I ought to know that too. And then I'm like, yeah, well, it still hurts a little bit that I can't know it all. I still have that little twinge.
But the thing is, you can figure it out on the spot.
Yeah,
a little bit,
or
with a little bit of time.
I can get help from a colleague.
Well, I think that's the thing about being back to being a service person, right? At the end of the day, you're going to be in front of customers, and there's going to be some customer, you just can't help them. They're going to yell, well, what are you good for? And you say, look, I tried my best. I'll get back to you later. Sir, please go to your room. I'll send someone up with some information about what restaurants you can eat at after 3:00 in the morning.
Yep.
I should note that we get very few customers who yell at us.
Yeah.
Or the request food.
Yeah, or that either.
Yeah, maybe 1 in 1,000. I mean, really seriously, almost all of our customers are extremely polite.
I've just met the nicest people.
Yeah.
Despite how terrified I've been going to some of these rooms, it has just been, everyone is just super, super nice.
I think it contrasts a lot with also the groups that we talk to, right? So you mentioned before, this is my second time around in CCG, and I think we will touch upon what I did in between, but part of what I did in between was interacting with a different customer base. And that customer base was at a higher level. They were more the managers level rather than what we do now. What we do now is that we're basically talking to the scientists themselves. And I think that also changes a bit the perspective, right? Because we are talking to them as a colleague, right? Scientist to scientist, not as I'm the manager. I have ordered this project to be done by now and I paid this amount of money for it. So it's a very different dynamic we have with them, right?
I don't know the details of why it's not done, just get it done.
Yeah,
whereas we're doing with science, and the science, was it not done well? This calculation is more difficult because of this. And as scientists, a lot of times we think you're doing A, B, and C. And then when you start doing it, it's like, A is a lot more complicated than I thought. Now they get into it, and then you talk to the client says, it is more complicated. I never thought of that aspect. Whereas you're right, someone deliverable, I don't care. I don't want your excuse. I want the foundation built. But sir, it's like quicksand over here. We can't build. I don't care.
Don't want to hear excuses.
Don't want to hear the excuses. I got a contract, got a hotel to go put up,
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's a very different experience.
It's very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you want to talk about why you left? Like why, or not? I mean, we don't have to. I don't.
Well, it was because I screamed at her.
It was because I screamed at her, wasn't it?
I think it's a mixture of many things. And I think that's always the case, right? I think that there's always many things. Now I am going to try and think back, because this was back in 17, 18.
I joined in 18 and I don't think we overlapped.
No.
So
maybe it was like February 18 or something like that. Let's just say it was around there. So, in my mind, that's been quite some years. But I remember I was stressed, right? We talked a lot about already some of the items that could make a person like me who's a bit highly stressed, right? Not knowing everything, going on customer visits, not knowing what this is, having to change your mindset.
Female ego?
Sorry?
Is it female ego? Is it the male ego? I think in the case of females, maybe it's more of an
I think it's the perfection,
Yeah.
I think
ways,
you validate your worth by external validation being perfect, right?
Okay. And with a man, it's just, I'm cool.
We call it in Denmark, and we don't have that grading scale anymore, but we used to have a special grade, the grade 13, which was super special.
Wait, this is a schooling grade?
Yeah, schooling grade, right? So you had the normal grading system with numbers, and then you had the super special grade 13, which was when you had done more than they expected, right? Now they realized at some point that didn't translate very well as we started to have more interactions with European universities and American universities, that wasn't a number you could translate to other countries' grading scheme. So they changed now, so we don't have that special grade, but there's a whole group of girls or young women that you call the 13 girls, right? Because they were used to overperforming. And suddenly when you put them in a situation where you possibly cannot overperform, it's heavily anxiety inducing. I wouldn't say that I was a pure 13 girl, but I could have probably been classified within that mental subset.
You're at least above a 10.
Yeah, and more.
Wait, so this is a step that the Danish government, they kind of stepped back from this grading scheme because they realized it was connected to maybe poor mental health outcomes. Or
I think it's because they just so you're plus 13 in Denmark. What does that mean? Like we've got grade 4.0, grade point average means something.
So it was less about the benefit to your mental health, but more about because it doesn't translate.
Yeah.
It doesn't add to the resume when you want to go abroad.
Yes, and that was exactly that. And also, as they realized that there was an inflation in grades, so they wanted to start over. They spent a lot of time, years, a lot of money. I happened to be in the study board of the natural sciences department when this happened, and we spent a lot of time on that. And I think the conclusion is that it didn't help, right? It basically didn't work. Okay, we have now a number that's closer to something we can translate, but in terms of inflation or in terms of mental health and stuff, it didn't change anything. But anyway, that was a long story short to explain this mental thing that I often think you find around girls.
That you felt, maybe this contributed to your first panic working with CCG.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've all been panicked. Right? I've been there too. Dave's been there too, going on site visits with an agenda of stuff that I just learned yesterday. But with a desire to help. Right?
And it's it's your first job. You're worried about being fired basically, and you move to a different country. I moved to a different country. I lived from paycheck to paycheck with my rent, basically. And you're like, okay, if something goes wrong, if I don't do this good enough, I'll be fired. And I'm not doing this good enough.
That's what I was thinking exactly.
I'll get rid of her.
So you've always worn like gold lame suits?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I understand now.
No, I live in Cambridge, so.
Oh. It's expensive.
Yes.
It's expensive.
Yes. So that was part of it. And then the other part was like, okay, this is my first job out of academia. I should see what else there is out there, right?
Yeah.
So I went to a different company. It was a similar job description, but they sold a different piece of software. It was a piece of software for electronic lab notebooks and for compound registration. And I had a bad time, a terrible time.
Well, because as I said before, I think it was a little more closer to true service. I want the software to work. Make sure it, boots up on the system.
That was definitely one of the things, right? And also, I think you get a certain mentality with different jobs, and I think I had been quite formed within CCG, and I think that shape, the CCG shape, didn't really match the shape of the other company.
Interesting.
Right?
So we already started to corrupt you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And
hone.
Hone corrupt.
And I think the
whittle.
Wow.
But the main real problem that we had was I thought we had an agreement on what I was being hired to do. They thought we had an agreement on what I was being hired to do. And those two things did not match up, right? So basically I sat there every day, wasn't able to do what I thought I was being hired to do. And they probably didn't get from me what they thought I had been hired to do. So it was a mismatch in any way. On all the levels, it was a mismatch. Not a bad experience per se. It's always good to get experience like that. I always say it's always good to see that there's different shades of brown grass that you don't like.
Brass, yeah. Well, she said brown. I thought something else.
No. It's just this whole thing about green grass. I don't really, I'm not sure I believe about it.
Hold on.
There's different shades of brown.
It rain in Denmark? Don't you have green grass there?
Yeah, I mean, it's really dry now, actually.
Well, not by okay. Before all the climate change and whatnot, now everything's. But traditionally, it was pretty green.
Pretty
and wet,
green, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Your point's a sophisticated one, though, in the sense that you know enough now that there's no green grass. There's no green grass. Green pasture of fighting unicorns that represent career success. It's just
it's a matter of finding the shade of brown that you can live with. That's how I view it.
Yeah. Anyway, welcome back to
CCG. So to conclude, I guess, welcome back. You found CCG, back to CCG again.
I'm very happy
the
you're
shade
having
of
me
brown
again.
that you like.
Indeed.
And hopefully you'll keep working for us for a while, because Dave and I aren't getting any younger.
Dave and I am about the same age.
And we are both incredibly youthful people. So Chris is the only old
I'm the only old fart here.
Yeah, exactly. All right, just before we wrap up, right? So we've got you're back with your second tour, right? Because that's what Chris calls them when you come back, tours.
Tour of duty. It's similar to it's
like Call of Duty.
Yeah, it's a contact sport.
Not on the,
it's getting better and better. Contact sport of green grass and brown grass. And
when did that start? When did the second tour start?
That was, I think it was
just before the pandemic.
Just before the pandemic. Yeah, you're right. It was like October 19 or something like that. Yeah. I was supposed to actually come and visit you for the UGM 2020, right?
I mean, the pandemic, I think, really helped us a lot in terms of forcing us to use Slack and Zoom a lot more. I mean, everyone's talked about that, obviously. But I think, especially with the support team, when we have our support meetings and, the whole board of all 25, 30 people show up, everyone speaks their mind. I think that really, helped, I think, a lot us communicate a lot better.
That's a super good point, because one of the things we didn't touch so much upon about me leaving was the fact that you are in a satellite office and you are far away from where things happen, right? And it can be really hard sometimes to understand why things are happening and maybe also be part of why that change is happening. And you really felt that from having visited Montreal for 2 weeks when I started, and you came back to this satellite office, you're like, ooh, I'm far away now. I'm really far away. And this other job I went to, I was in the main office and I enjoyed that thoroughly. I really enjoyed you could just walk down the hallway, talk to someone. If you want to talk to the developer, walk down the steps, you talk to the developer. And I felt a lot for the people in the remote office there. And I felt that the management in this other company also fully did not appreciate how hard it was for them to be remote. But all of that being said, the pandemic has leveled that a lot. It has really been a process of democratization almost.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because we use Slack a lot more to communicate. We use Zoom a lot more. Yeah. And because everyone at one point was at home, there was not this big group of people, right, that could just talk to each other across the hallway or go in the boardroom together, that was right?
The thing. And you're not necessarily at your desk when you're in the office, right? Yeah. But Slack and Zoom is the equivalent of I want to yell down the hall to anyone at the company.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, changed a lot.
For the better, like some good should come of the pandemic. And that was definitely a really benefit. And I got a much closer working relationship to many of my colleagues in North America as well, because, they also weren't in the office with people now.
Yeah, we did some wacky stuff during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah, I got so much work done not going into the office.
No, but I just, I remember we had Anna threw a Christmas party and we all wore funky Christmas hats.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. But after a while, those virtual parties got tired.
Yeah.
We still have some good virtual one-day conferences, like the Bio by Design is still virtual, and I think that works really well like that.
Yeah. Wait, that's a hybrid meeting, right?
No,
it's 100% virtual.
For now, I don't know if there's anybody.
Joanna's looking at me like I should know this. No, of course I knew that. That was a test.
Oh, obviously,
100%.
It's a one day, and I think it works really well.
It's great to have those mixed events where it's like, the 4 or 5 lectures. No one's going to fly somewhere for 4 or 5 lectures, so you can have a much more focused symposium
And you can have people from across the Atlantic as well, right? That's achievable if you do it online.
Yeah.
Early or late sometimes, but achievable.
And that's why we have it. And it's all 100% virtual, as I learned just now.
As you clearly knew.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So I think thanks for joining us, Sarah. Any advice for anyone who is looking for a job in application science? Maybe not just for...
I think the question is first to get them to look for that, right? I think that's always the key. How do we get people to know that we are here? Do you know what I mean?
That's a good point, because most people kind of universities don't think that.
Unless they go to ACS and they think, oh dear, no. Maybe.
Well, I think there's definitely a default when you do your postdoc, you think of becoming a professor, right? Or going into industry. This third option of becoming a technical support person, I don't think it's really advertised at the universities, as people don't think of it. I don't know. Maybe a lot of people in research don't necessarily have that temperament, right? When you go to do a PhD, how many people, what are the percentage of people that have that temperament?
Well, it's hard to say also, because I think at that stage in their career, most people wouldn't have tried it, right? Like I hadn't tried it. I didn't know if I had that temperament. You don't really know, I think, sometimes. I mean, it's not technically true, because I did a lot of teaching during my university, right? So I spent a lot of time.
Maybe that's the indicator. What we found is that people who like teaching, did you like your TA ships? Did you like tutoring? Did you have a little spare job teaching something? If you like that, and a support job would probably be pretty good for you.
Yeah.
If you don't like teaching people, and in our field we have people who are busy writing programs, doing certain things, they don't necessarily train people how to run the programs that they're busy trying to develop because they're doing research, they would join more research teams.
Yeah.
Good advice. I mean, I think it's nice for people to know that in our company, we don't wear suits. I think that's step number one, which
unless
I think...
gold lamy.
Well, obviously, Dave.
We do wear clothes though.
We do wear clothes, yes.
We do, except on Thursdays.
Yeah.
I did not think we had to actually specify that, but yes, we do wear clothes.
Some of the dress code's pretty relaxed.
It's gotten quite relaxed, hasn't it, since the pandemic?
Everyone's covered up, but I mean, sandals and socks are not.
Yeah, this is the most clothes I've worn.
But I find that really nice, and I find it really nice that the customers we go and interact with are very similar.
That's probably the biggest perk of this job is not having to wear a suit. I see those guys in the airports. It's pretty up there. Well, when you're in the airports and people got their suit bags, right? I got carry-on luggage, right? I can go for a few days. The suit bag, that's huge, right? Imagine how you can't check that. We got to check that.
Uncomfortable shoes.
Uncomfortable shoes too.
Uncomfortable shoes, yeah.
Uncomfortable shoes, comfortable clothing.
Yeah.
Advice. Well, I mean, obviously, I think everything we talked about is about not freaking out. It's about not making it about your ego. Right?
Well, that's just general advice for life.
Well, here we are, quite wise on life. Something. I don't know. Do you have good advice, Dave?
No
good advice.
I don't think I have good advice.
No. Okay.
I think you hit all the nails on the head.
Yeah.
Clothes, carry-on luggage.
Yeah.
What else was there?
International fame from helping people.
Sure.
International fame from helping people.
Humility.
I got that in spades.
Sorry?
I've got that in spades. Like I'm like the most humble person.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You're not wearing my gold.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens after this podcast. After this podcast goes viral. Yeah. Then we're going to see Dave's head explode.
At that point, I mean, Joanna, how many awards have you nominated us for at this point, Joanna? We're on number 3. So how many awards have you? Where did you say we were big, France? In the biotech space of all the podcasts being run by someone called Chris and someone called Dave.
Yeah.
So we're in the running. Number 2. Who's number 1? Tell us who they are. Joanna's.
Although it's more of a comedy. They see it as a comedy section. Right?
Is it the comedy? Is there a comedy biotech section? Yeah. Are we in that? Joanna's like, nope, stop talking to me.
Maybe we should be in there.
Maybe we should.
Yeah.
Have you had a good experience?
Well, we were called Comical Computing Group at one point when the company first came out.
What?
We had someone was being interviewed, I think in CNE News or something, and they commented, "What is this Comical Computing Group?"
But exactly. I love that. That's very nice.
Oh dear.
Was this as terrifying as you thought it would be? I know I asked you out of the blue a little bit, but has it been okay?
I don't think it was terrifying at all.
Oh, good.
Because it's just talking to two of my mates, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. All right, good. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
A treat meeting you in person.
Oh yeah, man. Can't believe I get to see you all in 3D now.
Yeah, you'll get to see a lot of us and you'll be seeing us.
As I said to Dave, I'm a bit like a Labrador these days. I'm like, ooh, I want to talk to you. Ooh. And then there's snacks in the office. I want to eat that.
Yeah, you might want to dial that one back in.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, thanks for joining us today, Sarah. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And hopefully our clients learned a little bit from this about what it's like to be a sports scientist.
Maybe they even want to join us.
Maybe, or maybe they'll be dissuaded. Either way, it is about knowledge transfer. Well, you know, the shoes
Hopefully we didn't lose customers.
And we have that shock treatment because this job is so different from doing your PhD.
For sure.
First slide where it's like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And if people can say, yeah, I don't mind dragging a booth across the city. Yeah, I don't mind interacting with clients to the wee hours of the morning over different types of food, then this job's for you.
That's right.
Perhaps. All right. Have a good day, guys. Cheers.
Yep. See you later.
Thanks
again,
having
Chris.
me. Take care.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Under the Surface. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other platforms so you don't miss an upcoming episode. Enjoying our podcast? Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Have topics or speaker suggestions for future episodes? Send an email to podcast@chemcomp.com. That's podcast@chemcomp.com. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep loving the science. Signing off.